I grew up in London, but I was actually born in Colombia. So at the age of three, my parents, my very young parents, they were 23, they sold everything that they had, including all of my toys, apart from two toys, to get the money to go to England. And so they packed up. We arrived in England, and that was kind of like this big, fresh beginning, I guess. And so I grew up in a household where my parents were so hardworking. They worked all the time. They worked night shifts, day shifts, extra shifts, afternoon shifts. I grew up a lot hearing the word shifts. And they worked McDonald's, they worked in restaurants. I ate a lot of chicken nuggets when I was a child. And it was this very I want to say like generative energy with me growing up, in the sense that everything was about how do we get further, how do we create more, how do we add more to what we have, how do we make things easier, and everything was about adding. What else can I add, what else can I add? At the same time, my father was diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia later on. And at the time, we didn't know that's what he had, but there were always these like violent outbursts and these, a lot of gaslighting, a lot of psychological abuse, a lot of emotional abuse that I actually haven't really spoken about, because I had the point of view that it would make people feel bad to speak about it. So I kind of hid it and protected my family, I guess. So it was this thing that was just not spoken about. And we didn't even speak about it within the family, even though we were living it. And it escalated and escalated. And it would, eventually get to the point where, my parents left, well, separated, my mom left. But it was terrifying. And so from a very young age, while all of this was going on, I had to kind of reach out to my own awareness, because there were many, many times where I had that sense of like being so alone. And what do I do if he actually hurts my mum, if he knocks her out, if he then comes and attacks me and my brother? What do I do? And so a lot of my questions were about survival, but they also got me to really start looking at what I knew and knowing that I had to be willing to make choices to create what happened next with everything, and being willing to know that my choices had an impact not just on me directly and like what I was wearing that day or which friends I hung out with, but with my whole family situation in the future. So when I was about 5 or 6, I very vividly remember, we were living in like government housing, like in these flats in London, and a really nice place, like, we loved it. And I remember very vividly this big argument that happened. And my brother was one. And I remember walking into the room, and my mom was just in the corner of the room on the floor, just like crying, like not knowing what to do. And my dad had a knife in his hand and was like trying to stab himself in the neck. And my brother was just like, I don't even know, running around or doing something, just confused. And I remember in that moment being like, wow, I am the only person who is somehow having the bigger picture or calm or something. It was just a split second. And I remember just walking up to him and just being this energy of like, no, like that's enough now. Like, no. And I remember, I think I touched his arm or something. So I remember so vividly walking up to the window and the light from the window, like just kind of on him, and just being like, no, that's enough. And also in that moment, just taking my brother away and checking in on my mom energetically, knowing that she was going to be okay. But that was the moment where I was like, okay, this is something that if I'm actually willing to kind of have the bigger picture, apparently I can step into this room. I'm not going to get killed. I'm not going to get stabbed. I'm not going to be attacked, but also because I won't allow it. and there was this certainty, and I don't know where it came from. Like, so I also grew up in a huge part thinking that I was insane, because I seemed to have these crazy points of view that I could do stuff and not really be affected the way that other people would. But it wasn't from like, I'm so confident, I'm super cool. I was just like, here you go. It's like, let's try it out. I get the sense it's going to be okay, so I'm just going to dive in. Like, and so it was this, I guess it was really a gift of like knowing and really having to trust my knowing, because there was nothing else I could hold on to then. That was the only thing that I had. But it also really put in me this sense that we all have choice. And so I also didn't grow up wanting to blame anybody for what had happened, which is in huge part why I'd never really spoken about this in such detail, because to me, it wasn't good enough to have the excuse to blame my father for the way that I was or for the situations. That was not good enough. Like, that was just not really acceptable. I was like, we're all so much greater than this. That's not a good enough excuse. Like, and I got so early on that we do have choice, perhaps in a very extreme way. But yeah. I never got that I was different. I'm still in the process of slowly starting to open that door. Like, it's so slow. It's really quite boring, I'm sure, for a lot of people around me. But I never got that that was different. I don't think you very often know what you're being when you're being it. So to me, I was just being what was required. I did notice that there was a difference in the way that I could be with my father in those situations. And what I noticed was that when I was willing to match his energy and then be greater than that, he just retracted like a little scared puppy. And so there were many times where things really hit a peak where I was actually scared for the safety of one of us in the house. And I would just go towards him and I would just match the energy. Age 12, age 10, like I was tiny. But I remember just being like, sorry, this doesn't happen. Like, if somebody needs to die, one of us is going to die here, but nobody else is getting harmed. And so that willingness, I think, to really just be whatever was required. And at the time I thought I was doing what was required, but I wasn't doing much. I was just walking towards him and standing next to him or putting my hand on him or just saying, no, like, stop it. Like, that's enough. And that's all it ever really took. But I never thought I was different. I thought I was very messed up and that it was something that I had to hide. And I thought that deep down I was probably exactly like him, which is why I could match his energy. So I was always scared of being that abusive. So I think, like, moving on into my life, what this gave me also was a lot of courage that I didn't know was courage at the time. But I remember, straight out of university, going for this job. And it was a very kind of high profile job, very rigorous selection process. It was a bit like being on Big Brother. It was very strange and extreme. And we were given lots of different tasks. And at the end of the day, one person would be kicked out publicly. And then out of like 500 or 700 people, like 4 of us got the job. And so, but all of these people were like amazing. They spoke like 19 languages. Their parents were like members of parliament. They were like super rich. They like went to Saint-Tropez for vacation, and they had like, all of their dogs had like gold leashes. And I felt like this homeless person next to them, because I had to, I very luckily had my stepdad lend me £20 to buy a small suitcase from the market so that I could actually have some to take my clothes in to the interview in Spain. So I was like, oh my God, what am I doing here? I do not fit in at all. And I remember at one point being given this task, and we had 5 minutes to give a 5-minute presentation to prepare it. And I spent 2.5 of those minutes in the bathroom with my handbag on my lap, wondering, should I leave or should I stay? And then I was like, do you know what? I don't have anything to lose here. Whether they like me or not, who cares? I've made it this far. And I went in there and I didn't try and sound fancy or prove how much knowledge I had or how intelligent I was. I just went totally for, I guess, just the energy of being now that I look at it. And I gave the most random, funniest example, which they thought was brilliant, that I was like, really? You think that's brilliant? And it was incredible to me because at that moment, I was like, wow, there may be something valuable to actually just being yourself and not having to prove how like fancy and cool you are. And that job, like I loved it and I did it for a very long time and I ended up being very successful and it expanded into a lot of different things. But it definitely, I have to say that my childhood definitely contributed to me having a level of courage that is not normal. In this day and age, if you want to say it that way, you know, like when everyone is going crazy and there's so much control and there's so many less like opportunities for people, like what does make you different that creates the possibilities? Because if you're willing to have a different mindset, if you're willing to perceive a different future, if you're willing to be the person that is asking a question when everyone else is in conclusion, in judgment, that's what's going to create you thriving. And not just you, but like me when I was a child, when I realized that every choice I made impacted the people around me in the future we were going to have, that's what you get to choose and be with every choice, rather than having your choices be so limited based on this reality, based on judgment, polarity, wrongness, rightness. You're suddenly now accessing this whole other way of being and interacting with the world that goes way beyond the control that's being dished out as though that's the only option we've got available. I think I would say whatever you're feeling or whatever you're thinking or whatever you have as emotions, this is going to sound crazy, but that's not really you. Okay. You are an infinite being. It doesn't have all of that stuff. You can pick it up, you can choose it for a moment, you can walk around chewing on it for a while if you like, but it's not you. So feeling stuck by that stuff feels so heavy because it's not you, because it's not true, because you as a being, you actually have this lightness and this space to you. And that was what got me to like the next possibility and the next choice, because I knew deep down this feels so wrong and so heavy and stuck, like there has to be something else available.